So as we look at the law, as we look at these different commandments, I want to give you a few things that might be helpful, questions to ask when you're studying the law. What principle of God's character is working here? As we read the law, we want to ask that question. How is God's character interacting with this specific situation?
I'm thinking of Matthew 23. 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the greater matters, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone.
Mm-hmm.
I think through the whole narratives of the Old Testament, God is pointing in that direction.
Yeah.
I think it reveals his character of mercy and justice. And
Mm-hmm.
those my thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're very right. There's a difference, he says, without leaving off those things. So you can have somebody who truly is reflecting the image of God and out of love for the Levites, who they were supposed to bring the tithe for. They bring their dill, their mint, their cumin, which are the minutia of the garden. That's the smallest, last degree, and they're making sure they give the tenth of all the produce, not just the big stuff like grain and or wheat and barley and those things, but even down to the mint and the cumin. It's a very exacting tenth they're talking about. You may have somebody who is doing that because they really do love the servants of God, the Levites who are supposed to be there to help them and everything else. They really might be wanting to, I'm honored to give you your due. And they would express that. And then you have the Pharisee who's coming and does the exact same thing on the surface. They also tithe their dill and their mint and their cumin, but they do it in order to be seen before men, or in order to be seen or to receive God's, not God's, to be seen as righteous and to increase their own name and their own status. That's what Jesus condemns, because it's not a matter of action. Action is a byproduct of the heart. Actions always come out of the heart. And the same action can have very different results. We were just talking at the break about when the people go into the land. God tells them first, go into the land. And they are terrified and they don't go. They sin. They disobey God's law. And then God says, well, because you did this, you will wander 40 years in the desert. Then all of a sudden they have a change of heart. They say, okay, we will go into the land. And they do the thing that God told them to do at first. They actually go in and they do it. But they're defeated. They're unable to conquer. They come out crying. Because again, what they did was, the action was the same that God had asked of them, but the heart was again one of disobedience. They didn't listen to the Lord. Actions are not what's at stake here. A heart of obedience and love for God is what it should drive every one of the actions of the law. We talk often about You know, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Somebody remember where that passage is in the gospel, off their top of their head? Matthew? Or where is that saint when Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you"? Where is that passage? Let's read that together. Let's look at what the Pharisees were doing with that. Chapter 5. Thank you. 5:38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you in the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. So what's happening here? What in the context that Jesus says this, what is the attitude behind that phrase, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? It's hatred, and it's evil for evil. It's the one who had evil done to them, right? Do not resist the one who is evil. So the one who is the victim here is yelling out, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's the law. And it's the victim who is making that claim. Jesus says, you've misunderstood the law. What is the context of that very same passage in Exodus? It's not the victim who gets to make the demand for eye, tooth for tooth. It's the one who did the wrong who is called on to pay eye for eye, tooth for tooth. It's the judge who makes that decision. The victim is not even mentioned here. This is an opportunity for the one who did the wrong to do justice. And if he will not do justice, the judges will force him to do justice. But from the perspective of the victim, Jesus is saying, you don't need to be the one who demands your justice. That is up to the person who did the wrong to do justice. That's not your job. The one who received the wrong needs to walk in forgiveness. Do not resist an evil person. Turn to the other also. It's not your job to demand justice, you who have been wronged. You who have been wronged, your job is to walk in forgiveness and let God force the one who did the wrong into justice. That will happen. And here the victims are crying out for, in Matthew, the victims are crying out for justice and forcing the one who did the wrong to be held accountable. God's saying, don't worry about that. Don't resist him. Go with him 2 miles. Why does it not matter? Why is that a reflection of the character of God? And shows a deeper heart of the character of God is because that God is the one in Exodus who said, the judges will make him pay an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. You don't have to worry about it. As the victim, you can trust God to worry about it. And when you decide to walk in forgiveness or decide to metaphorically turn the other cheek, you are putting your trust in God for justice and not taking it into your own hands. Jesus is not breaking or violating that law. He is trying to get through the hearts of the Pharisees who are misusing that law. They don't understand the heart of God behind it, and that's why they cry out for justice instead of trusting God for justice. And he brings correction. No, if you are the one who is in the wrong, you need to trust the Lord to vindicate you. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. In the book of Psalms, we have you ever heard of the imprecatory Psalms or the cursing Psalms? where David will call out horrible things against his enemies, right? God, break their teeth, dash their infants against wall. Like, there is some horrific things that David asks God to do in the name of justice. David writes about 80% of all those kinds of psalms in the book of Psalms. 80%. By that, if we had that alone, I would say David is the most vengeful and wrathful and not godlike person ever. But when we read in the narrative of how David actually treats his enemies, it looks very different. Why is that the case? Because he trusts God for vengeance. He trusts God to vindicate him, and God does. And in the very act of crying out to God for justice, he's able to take that burden of whatever his enemies have done to him and put it on God to deal with, allowing him to walk in forgiveness, to say, I will not put my hand on God's anointed. He's struck to the heart when he cuts the corner of Saul's robe off because I had an opportunity to kill him. Far be it from me to do that. That is God's realm, and God will take care of it. David's able to walk in a way that surprises all of the people around him over and over again with his enemies. He mourns the death of Saul. The guys who lie and come to him bearing the crown and other elements of Saul's attire after he's killed, they lie saying they're the ones who killed him, and David has them put to death. They thought they were going to get a reward for killing the enemy of the king. And David holds a mourning ceremony for Saul, this man who persecuted him so royally. How is he able to do that? Because it's on God to do justice. It's on him to turn the other cheek. But I think there's a principle there for us. The Psalms demonstrate, as one of the only books we have that demonstrate our relationship to God, not just the history of how God interacted with his people, but how his people interacted with God. These prayers come out of that covenant promise that God made in chapter 17 to live your life out in my face. Don't hide anything from me. David takes God at his word, and he speaks out some pretty horrendous, ungodly things towards his enemies. But that's because that's really what's in his heart. And he brings all of that without hiding anything to God. That's what makes him a man after God's heart. And I think there is something for us to take away from that. That's what God asks of us. That doesn't change in the New Testament. We are still asked to be open with God, to bring all of our cares and our burdens to him because he cares for us. We're going on a tangent, but if somebody harms you, the job of forgiveness is not, okay, Lord, help me to forgive that person. Oh, I know I should love them. Help me to forgive them. No. You may speak out whatever it is, whatever hatred, whatever reality is in your heart towards that person. You have the full freedom and the command to speak that out in prayer to God. That's what he's asking of you. He's not asking you to clean up yourself before you bring it to him. He's asking you to bring yourself to him as you are in reality. When we do that, it's not just a one-way prayer. God promises that he hears, that he sees, that he knows, and he will vindicate you. God is on your side. God does not like when you are hurt or when you are mistreated. And when we do that, that is an act of trusting God with our enemies, with those who hurt us, and allows us to not seek vengeance and not take it into our own hand. It allows us to love our enemies and do good to those who persecute us. God doesn't want the right answer. He wants the reality of our heart. That's a little bit of a tangent, but that is, I think, a very important thing for us to understand. He already knows all those things you're feeling and going through. He's not surprised by it in the least. Don't try to hide it from him. That only makes him angry, as we saw in the book of Exodus. So what I want to do now is, if you can break into small groups, 2 or 3 people, we're going to look at I'm going to give you a couple different laws throughout, and I'll give you 5 or 10 minutes to ask this question and the second question as well, which is this. You can say my or our, doesn't matter, whatever. It's a general thing or if it's actually in your personal life, whatever. All right, let's have that table, you 4, you 2, or you 4. Let's put you 4 together. You 5 there. You 6. Let's just do the rows like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right? This table will be 21, verse 16. Next table will be 22, verses 5 through 6. Next table will be 22, 10 through 13. This table will be 22, 21 through 24. This table will be 21, 35 through 36. This table will be 23, 4 through 5. And the last table will be 23, what do I have there? 23:19b, or the last little line of 23:19. I'll give you 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and just discuss what you found. Or our. It can be either general, like our culture or our situation today, or it can be personal. Guys, back together. First of all, well done, because that is the work of figuring out how does the Word of God apply in my life. That is the work it takes. We have to take it, take what has been written and given to us, find out what the Lord is speaking there, what He is communicating there across time, across cultures, and then bring that out and put it into our lives. That's the work of interpreting and applying. So well done. There's not going to be a lot of. I'm not looking for a particular answer, so don't think that I have the right answer on any of this. Okay, but I would like to hear what you came up with. So I started here with 21:16, right? What did you come up with for the principle, and maybe an example of how it might apply to us?
First of all, we were thinking that he's making a profit at another's expense. He's stealing the man, or
Can-
kidnapping.
Okay, can you read the passage real quick for everybody? Just yeah, no, you're good. That's good.
16. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hands, shall surely be put to death. So we were looking at that as, he's stealing, kidnapping, the word child trafficking. How do you say that?
Trafficking, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be today's principle
Mm-hmm.
in that sense. And he should be brought before the courts for judgment. He stole it.
Mm-hmm.
Stealing property from another. He done us for steal it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Very good. What was the principle that
Well,
is there? So that's the good application.
taking from another's property,
Mm-hmm.
stealing. And stealing it can be anything for us.
Mm-hmm.
Little things, bigger things.
Yeah.
We're not to steal. Reveals the character of God.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Which one did I give you guys? Can you read that for us? And
So if a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed bare, and lets his animal loose to let it grazes, in another man's fields he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes, so that stacked grain or standing grain or the field itself is consumed, he who started the fire shall surely make restitution. So what we had from God's character was God's generosity.
mm-hmm.
So as in, because of the restitution towards the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be stealing, or even if it's unintentional. So that was kind of applied today. Today was like, even if things unintentionally happen within our care, we replace with better to the best that we can.
That's a good point. Yeah. Very good. What would be an example of that, perhaps? And I mean, I guess that's in a very general sense. That is an example of how that would work for us as well. Is there any particular context that might apply in?
I was saying that if I borrowed somebody's sewing machine that cost them only $500 and I broke it, so it wasn't fixable, I in turn might have to give my $2,400 machine to them because that's the best that I have and give it to them.
Excellent. Because it's from your best, right?
My best, yeah.
Yeah. And in what heart would you do that if you're going to reflect the Lord? Awesome. Yes. That's very good. Very good. How about this table here? Which passage did I give you? 22:10 to 13. Okay. Yep. Yes, please.
If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep safe, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to his owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution till it be found.
Very nice. What's the principle of God's character there? Mm-hmm.
I was thinking along the lines when if it has been stolen and I'm responsible for it, right? Because it's at my place, just like your vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
you want to return it to your friend, right?
Right.
And so if it's stolen in my possession, while it's in my possession, I have to make restitution, or I have to
Mm-hmm.
replace it. Unless I can, in 13 it talks about if it's torn in pieces or whatever, if it died by, then I'm not responsible.
Something outside of your control. Yeah.
Then I don't have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're not obligated at that point, no, in the law. But what would be if the principle is God's justice there, and in other places we see a principle of love, what would still be a lawful thing to do in that case? If your animal had been torn by beasts, you're not obligated to pay for it by any means. Still replace it.
Like their example with the vest
Mm-hmm.
you have, even though it might be of more value than what his animal is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Yeah. There's lots to glean out of this, and yeah, these are very good answers. Very good. How about this table here? What was the verse I gave you?
Chapter 22, verse 21 to 24.
Okay.
Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless.
What is the principle of God's character there? Why does he get so angry? What causes God to get angry with that?
God's wrath.
We had just said it, like it demonstrates his wrath.
Yeah. Yep.
And another one I thought of was the women who were taken advantage of. They didn't seek vengeance themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of God, and God took care of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very, very good observation to make in that passage. When they cry out to God, he hears. How does God view those who are powerless in the world? This can be for anybody. Not just picking on you, but how does God view the powerless in the world?
Well, he demonstrates it over and over, even in when armies come against, the Syrian army comes against Hezekiah.
Mm-hmm.
He killed 185,000 without, theirs was to trust that God would.
Right.
And he looks after those that trust him.
Yeah, that's a very good example. Yep. Yep. Those who stayed in the city did so at the word of the Lord, and they were saved. And God struck and was angry with and struck against those who thought they could overpower the weak and the helpless. Yeah. Thank you. 21, 35 through 36. Who did I give that to? All right. What's the character of God at work there? Yep. Mm-hmm. How would my friend be demonstrate the character of God then to me if that was what happened? If I crashed the car because of something he knew and didn't tell me, how could he make it right? How could he be just? Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So if that ever happened where I mis misled someone and told them no, the car's fine, go for it, and that happened, then I'm cut to the heart when he crashes and he's hurt. Uh, it would probably be right to pay not only for his medical bills, but to also gift him with I don't know. You could come up with any number of ways in which to do justice for the one that you've wronged. Yeah, very good. Thank you. And this table, I gave you what verse? 23, 4 through 5. Can you read that for us?
Meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray. You shall surely bring it back to him again. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying under its burden, you would refrain from helping it. You should surely help him with it. And reference it back to Matthew 5:38.
Matthew 5:38.
You have heard it. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist the evil person. But whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your coat also. And whoever compels you to go a mile, go with him too. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. And
Yeah.
also Romans 12, verse 20. Maybe start from 19. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Awesome. Yes. There's a lot of application for us, and I don't know how many of you have enemies. It does both, right? It says if you meet your enemy, that means somebody you don't like, somebody you really despise, and something's going wrong with his property or his possessions. The character of God is no. You will show honor and you will show dignity to that person, even if you are at odds with them, and you will help them because they are made in God's image. And the backside of that is if you see the donkey of one who hates you. Now you're the one at fault, and you know there's something wrong with this person. You also have an opportunity now to make amends, show kindness, whatever the issue may have been. So whether you're the one who hates that person or that person's the one who hates you, in the law, this is an interesting thing. The law still puts the onus on you. Doesn't change the tables. Whether you hate that person or that person hates you, you are obligated to show love, to show kindness, to be merciful. And actually that will bring reconciliation, right? If you show kindness to one who hates you, that tends to soften the heart. I want to make a mention that in all throughout the law, the 10 Commandments, they're all spoken out in the second person singular. You, individual. Not you plural, but you individual. If you have a King James, it might be thy. That's the Old English word for you singular. You in King James, in Old English, is plural. We've dropped that in modern English, and we just say you plural for everything, and you have to find out by context what you mean. So when it says you shall not murder, that's not you all shall not murder. It is directly pointed to each individual who hears or reads this text. Every single person is accountable to the law, not just as a people, but the individual. All right, last table, 2319b. Marge, could you please enlighten us on this law? What principle of God's character is at work here? There's really not a wrong answer, so don't be afraid, because this is a random bit of information that may have had more meaning then than it does now. But take a crack at it.
Apparently, like every law has been because somebody did this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think maybe they were imitating pagan ritual.
And what would that then, if that's the case, what would this be in reference to? Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Very good. I don't think milk and meat is really the issue here, personally. My own, that's a very good interpretation, and that I think is what a lot of people say. Yeah, but I think there's something significant in that. It's the mother's milk. He doesn't just say, don't boil a kid in milk. He says, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. And I think that points back to the compassion and the care of Yahweh. He created mother's milk to be a sustenance, a life-giving thing to this young goat. And you're using it to destroy it and consume it. You are twisting the order of creation. So don't use the thing that I created to give life. Don't use that to bring death. And I think God's rule and His law is not just for humanity. It applies to all of creation. It applies to everything that He has made. And He cares. We know in the New Testament it says He cares even for the sparrows, right? He feeds them. He cares for them. He cares even for the goats that He commands to be sacrificed. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. 23:19, the last line before 20. It's not even its own verse. It doesn't even get its own verse in the Bible. It's like half a verse. But it will appear, God will give 10, well, this is getting into tomorrow, but God will give 10 commandments of a new covenant in Exodus 34. And guess what? That one makes it in. A lot of other ones don't come back in. They're not there, but this one makes it back in there. Go figure. But that's a very big, like what you said, that's a very big thing of this could have been a divination practice. This was frequently, divination was done with all different kinds of signs and omens and magic rituals, and that may be what this is referring to. That's very well could be. And whether it means that or the other, we can still derive the character of God from it and apply it to our lives. In chapter 24, they have now been made holy, they've been made clean. I did want to show you one more piece before we go to the tabernacle. This is the Code of Hammurabi. This is also a code of law that was given in 1792 BC. So if Moses comes out in 1446, during the time Israel was in Egypt, somewhere in here, was Hammurabi. Is a Babylonian king in Mesopotamia. And I want to show you a parallel here. If it's hard to read, I will read it for us. Exodus says, "But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death." Whereas the Code of Hammurabi, which predates the law of Exodus, says if a seigneur or a free man's ox was a gorer, and his city council made it known to him that it was a gorer, but he did not pat its horns or tie up his ox, and that ox gored to death a member of the aristocracy, he shall give 1/2 a mina of silver. And then if if it was a seigneur's slave, he shall give 1/3 a mina of silver. And here you see that Hammurabi's code puts value on human life in accordance with their social status. And that their death is not really the full responsibility of the ox's owner, as it is in Exodus. If this happens in Exodus, the ox's owner is liable to judgment, because it's now becomes, now he has disregarded the commandment, do not kill. He's done nothing to solve that problem. So you see that in Exodus there are some things that are much more harsh, much more strict, but it also does not make a distinction between man, woman, slave, free, noble or otherwise. Anyone who is gored by the ox, doesn't matter who they are, the price will be your life if you knew that it was a gore and you did not do anything about it. That's a whole new way of understanding humanity. That comes from the mind of God. That all of humanity are equal in value. Life for life.
If it's his code, and you said that predates even the Exodus law, I'm just thinking that, okay, where does he get this from? You know, God has created, I'm thinking of Romans chapter 1. We have his law within our hearts. Even as a human being, apart from scripture readings, but creation reveals the character of God. And there's a law within, right or wrong.
Yep.
Moral law.
Yep. The Code of Hammurabi comes, we have a English translation of it, and it's all written down. There's a lot of really interesting parallels to the Old Testament law. But over and over again, it's demonstrated that the law of Moses, the law of Yahweh, puts a new standard on old ways of thinking. And it really does blow the Code of Hammurabi out of the water when it comes to what is true justice, like this example shows. Any other questions or things about the law? We are at 9 o'clock. I was going to go into this next piece, but I'll just whet your appetites, I guess, for tomorrow. At this point, the covenant has been made. They are at peace with God. They are ready for God to come and dwell with them. And it's only after that is true that we have the tabernacle building instructions from 25 through 31. Moses goes into great detail describing how they are supposed to build the tabernacle. We're not going to get into all those details. We don't have the time. They are fascinating. But the biggest thing to remember is that when an author, anywhere in the Bible, when you're studying, when an author stops and starts writing loads and loads and loads about one topic, that's important. That's where his emphasis is. That's where he really wants his readers to be focused. This is the place being prepared for God to dwell with man. Has not happened, as I said, since before the fall. This is an exciting moment in the history of the world. And he's making you focus on all the things that God put in place so that he could dwell with his people, so that chapter 40 can happen. But God has one more major obstacle to overcome in order to truly be able to dwell with his people and not destroy them. And that is their own sinfulness, their inability to keep his covenant. He finds fault with them. They're unable to reflect him rightly. And they break the law and become haters of God. Now God has a choice. Either I destroy them and start over, or I change something yet further so that I can